Hi my crafty friends, welcome to the Upcycle Design Lab. If this is your first time here, my name's Cindy and I craft using recycled and repurposed materials to give you ideas on ways to make and create more economically and ecologically. Today I thought I would show you 5 different earring jewelry designs that I've created from aluminum beer and soda drink cans to go with my trash fashion wedding dress. If you've been following that series, you know that I've created several different pieces out of recycled materials, a lot of them made from the parts of aluminum cans. And so I'm making some jewelry to go along with that ensemble. But I thought I would show you my 5 different earring designs. You can tell me which one you like the best. But before we get started, I did want to mention that you probably are going to want to check out the description box of this video. There will be a ton of resource videos there for you if you are not familiar with working with aluminum cans or if you haven't seen some of my other video tutorials. I've done a full tutorial on safety. I get a lot of questions about the sharp edges and working with the aluminum cans. There's a video tutorial on how I break down my cans into 4 usable parts. I've done a video on several different ways to remove the tops of the aluminum cans, 3 different ways that you can flatten the cans into sheets. There's a video tutorial on how to cut the aluminum cans on your Cricut cutting machine, and also a tutorial on how I make rolled beads from the aluminum cans as well. So if you're unfamiliar with any of those steps or you need a refresher, be sure to check the description box for those video tutorials, and I'm just going to jump right in and be making the actual jewelry pieces in this video. This first design is very simple, and it's using a shape that I used on the bodice of my wedding dress. So it's just a simple little flower petal shape that I have cut on my Cricut cutting machine. And if you cut aluminum on a Cricut cutting machine, it doesn't separate from the metal. You have to go ahead and kind of bend the metal back and forth along the score line in order to break the metal and get the piece out. So once I have my shape separated out from the rest of the metal, I'm going to go ahead and use my embossing tool and just do a little line around the edge. I'm kind of self-taught with my jewelry making, so you'll see that I have sort of maybe some unconventional ways of doing things. And then I just want to go ahead and reinforce my embossing line. So I'm switching to a hard surface, and I'm going to just go right around up to the edge of where I embossed on the other side. And it just kind of flattens out the piece and reinforces the design that you've drawn. And next I have just a tiny piece of aluminum can that I've punched out with just a regular hole punch. And I want to put that in the center of my flower. And I need a padded surface here. And I'm going to use a stylus to punch a hole right in the center of both of my pieces. I got this stylus and my embossing tool at the Dollar Tree, so they're not expensive tools at all. And now I just have a needle and some thread, and I'm going to start on the back of my 2 pieces. Thread my needle through and pull it through and leave about a 2-inch tail. And then I have some tiny little seed beads, and I'm just going to pick up one of those beads on my needle. And then I want to hold the tail threads so that everything's tight, and I want to go back through my 2 metal pieces, but not back through that small seed bead. And then I pull my thread tight. And I'm going to be using just a little stud earring for the back. So I'm going to add a little bit of E6000 glue to that. My E6000 glue is almost gone, so I use my pliers to get it out. But just going to put a little bit on the back of my earring here. All right, so I want to pull both ends of my thread tight again so that all of my pieces are staying snug together. And once I've got everything tight, I'm going to go ahead and put my back earring back on and make sure I've got it centered and that everything's staying nice and tight. And I'm going to let my glue dry, and once that glue is set up, I can go back and trim my threads off. So that's design number 1. For design number 2, the beginning is the same as the first design, but I wanted to make sort of a more dangly, fun, long, drapey type of earring. And so I added some additional floral pieces with the embossing. I'm just using stuff from my stash, and so I don't know exactly what size these are, but you can see that they're quite different than a standard, or what I think of as a standard size jump ring. So I apologize that I don't know exactly what size these are, but you do need a slightly larger jump ring in order to reach through the metal and have the pieces still be kind of dangly and drapey. So I'm going to start this earring just the way I did my last pair of earrings, and I'm going to poke a hole in my circle and in one of my flowers. I've already gone ahead and embossed all of my flower pieces. And then I'll take my needle and thread, and again I want to hold my tails tight, thread on my bead, and go back through my 2 metal pieces. Add a little E6000 glue to my earring stud, and then while I'm holding my threads tight, just press the 2 pieces together and center the stud in the middle of my flower. And again, I'll wait to trim the threads until my glue has set up a little bit. Then we'll go ahead and build the chain here. So I'm going to start with one of my flowers, and I need to punch 2 holes. I'm going to punch a hole to hook to the part that's on the earring stud, and that part I want to be on the petal, and then the bottom hole will be between the 2 petals. So I'm going to punch 1 hole in the center of a petal and right below that where the 2 petals meet. And then I'm going to do that with the next 4 pieces, the same thing. And on my last piece, which is going to be the bottom, I want to make sure I just punch a hole in the top petal and not at the bottom of the piece. So I'm going to set that one aside, so I'm sure to put that on the bottom. And then I'm going to work with 2 sets of needle nose pliers to apply my jump rings to the pieces and hook them together. The one thing about these aluminum embossed pieces is that they are very thin, and so you want to make sure that you're getting your jump rings closed really tightly, because these pieces are so narrow they will slip out. So I've got my jump ring through the bottom of my petal, because this hole will attach to the top of the earring. So I want to put my next piece on with the hole in the top of the petal, and you want to make sure that you're getting your pieces going the same direction as far as color. Even though the printed side will show, you want them all to kind of be aligned. So you want all the silver on one side and all the colored pieces on the other. And once you get those strung together, you can go ahead and use the 2 pairs of pliers to close the jump ring. And like I said, you want to get it as tight as possible, because these pieces are so thin they will slip out. So there's the first link. I'm going to take another jump ring and thread it through the bottom of this flower and the top of the next one, and I'll just carry on until I get to the bottom where I can add my last piece. All right, so there's our little chain. This is probably slightly premature, but I'm going to go ahead and punch a hole in my top flower here. And we'll hook it together with 1 final jump ring, and then I will go ahead and trim that thread off. So there's finished design number 2. The third earring style actually uses the top ring of the aluminum cans, and if you don't know how to break down to get to this part, check the description box and watch the video where I detail my method for breaking down the aluminum cans. You'll notice that you're left with a rough edge on the one side of the rim, and for this project I just kind of knocked those down with a hammer to get them more even, and they're still rough, so we are going to go ahead and cover up those edges, but it just makes them a little bit smoother to work with. So the first thing you want to do is shape your rings into more of an oval shape. And I did them at the same time so that they would be a similar shape. You can just bend them by hand. You want to be careful not to bend them back toward each other, but if you work slowly, you can get them into more of an oval shape, or you could leave them round if you preferred them that way. So once I had my shape bent, I want to go ahead and cut at the bottom end of the ring here. And I think you can do it with needle nose pliers. You might need something a little heavier duty, but I want to cut as close to the center of that bend as I can. For this design, I'm going to add a couple of cylinder rolled aluminum beads. And as I mentioned, I have a whole tutorial on several different rolled bead styles that I've made from aluminum cans. And you can check that video out in the description. So I'm just going to slide 2 beads on either side of my cut here. And then I have some metal tape here. I've used metal tape for a lot of my aluminum can projects. It's very easy to use. It's got paper backing, and it's a very tacky tape, so it's great for a lot of different aluminum can projects. And I'm just going to use a tiny strip to wrap around this seam here to hook the ring back together. Then I want to slide my 2 beads as close to the bottom as I can. I want them kind of centered. And then, as I mentioned, you want to cover up this rough edge. So I have some glitter crochet thread here, and I'm just going to use a little bit of E6000 glue to start to attach the cording, and then I'll just wrap the entire ring until I get back to the other side, and I'll attach it with some E6000 glue. About 3 or 4 turns and you've got it tight enough so you can kind of pull it. And then I think I have about 15 wraps around my fingers for the amount of cording that I need. And I think that's going to be plenty. So we'll say about 23 actually, but I think I'm going to have some extra. Just if you're trying to figure out how much cording to use. And obviously, if you have a fatter cording that you're working with, it's going to take a little bit less in length. So you can see that just covering up that rough edge. And I'm just going to keep working until I get around to the other side. So I'm almost to the end here, and you can see that I have quite a bit of cord left, so that was definitely plenty of cording. It's kind of a fine line because you don't want to have too little, but you also don't want to be dealing with a lot of extra cording as you're wrapping either, because it is sort of easy to get tangled up. So I would say, 20 wraps around 4 fingers is plenty for one hoop. Go ahead and trim off my excess here and add a little bit of glue and secure this end off. I've gone ahead and embossed my little aluminum flower charms, and I'm going to go ahead and add my larger one in the middle of my 2 spacer beads, and then I'll put the smaller ones on the outside of the spacer beads using, again, my larger silver jump rings. And then I'm just going to use one more jump ring to attach the fish hook earring hook, and that will complete the second earring. So there's earring style number 3. For the fourth earring style, I have just a tiny bit of my crochet thread again, and I've put a little piece of tape on the end because I'm going to be using some crimp beads, and I think these are called little clamshell hooks, and you use them together to string earrings and bracelets together. I'm not super talented at using these, but I have gotten them to work a few times. So to start this earring, I'm going to add a crimp bead. I'm just going to slide it onto my cording. And then I'm going to use my pliers to pinch the crimp bead onto the cord so that it won't slide. You don't want to crush it, but you do want to make sure it's tight enough so that it won't slide up and down anymore on the cording. And then I'm going to add my little clamshell, and I want to make sure that it closes over my crimp bead. So I'm going to put it on facing the crimp bead, and hopefully you can see how smashed this crimp bead is. I'm going to go ahead and trim the most of the excess cord off here. And then I want to make sure that the crimp bead is sort of laying flat inside this little clamshell. If you get it twisted to the side like this, and then you close the clamshell, it'll sort of, I think it breaks the crimp bead, or somehow it smashes it back open so that it doesn't hold the cord anymore. So you want to make sure that it's laying flat inside of the clamshell so that it won't be pinched when you close this little clamshell. And I'm going to do that with my pliers. And if you've done it right, it should still hold nice and tight. And then I'm just going to slide on another one of my aluminum can beads. This is the oval bead, and you can find it in the bead tutorial as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and just put another clamshell and crimp bead on. And the tricky part about this is that you need to do them in the reverse order. So I want to slide on my clamshell first. Then I'm going to slide the crimp bead on. And then I try to grab the crimp bead with the tip of my needle nose pliers and slide everything tight down inside the little clamshell and pinch my crimp bead. Didn't quite get it tight enough. It's sliding. Slide that and just pinch it a little bit tighter. And then I can go ahead and trim off the excess cord again. And I just want to make sure that I have my crimp bead laying flat inside the clamshell so that it won't get pinched open when I close the clamshell here. And I've already embossed my little flower shape. I'm going to hook that on one of my clamshells. And I usually close the rings with my round tip pliers. You can probably use regular needle nose pliers too, but these little round tip jewelry pliers fit in much nicer. And you just curl that hook back and secure the piece on there. And then I'm going to hook my earring hook to the other end. And there's earring style number 4. For the last design, I'm going back to a little bit of my glitter crochet thread. And again, I've got a piece of just cellophane tape on the tip so I can kind of use it as a needle. And I'm going to be using some of my oblong beads that are made from aluminum cans and also a few little spacer beads. I also have this new bead that I've created. I haven't done a tutorial on it yet, but I'm using it at the bottom of the earring, and I will be posting another tutorial on how to make this bead soon. So this is a very simple piece to put together. Again, I'm going to use a crimp bead on the very end of my piece of cord. And then I'm going to use my pliers just to flatten it out or crimp it onto the cord. You want to make sure that you've got it tight enough so that that bead isn't, or that crimp bead isn't sliding at all. And then I'll take my clamshell, and again I want to make sure that it's facing the little clam shell is going to close over the crimp bead. So I want to make it face the crimp bead as I thread it on. And then again, I want to make sure that I have the crimp bead laying flat inside the clamshell before I close it so that I don't crush the crimp bead. And before I do that, I'll trim off my end. And close this. So I've got 8 of my oblong beads that I'm going to alternate with the spacer beads. And once I have all my beads strung on, I want to go back and do my crimp bead again. And as I mentioned before, we're going to work backwards this time. So we're going to put the clamshell piece on first. We want it facing out toward the end of our thread so that when we slide the crimp bead on, it will fit inside the little clamshell there. So again, I want to go ahead and just get a hold of the crimp bead with the tip of my pliers. And I'm going to slide it down into the clamshell, kind of pull all my beads tight, and go ahead and crimp or pinch the bead onto the cord. Hopefully it won't slide around. And then again, I want to make sure that it's laying sort of cradled inside the clamshell and not going perpendicular to it. And then I can trim off my excess and close my clamshell. And then to finish this earring, I'm going to take one of the little hook ends and add my little pillow bead. And I'll add my earring hook to the other end. And that is earring style number 5. So I do have a couple of other things to show you. I wanted to go ahead and just make a sort of pendant necklace to go with the whole ensemble. I have made this fun, silly memory coil bracelet with some of my aluminum can beads. And perhaps silliest of all, I also made this silly engagement ring out of the aluminum cans and the pull tabs from some aluminum cans. So that is the full silly jewelry ensemble for the trash fashion wedding dress. And I just need a pair of earrings to go with it. So let me know which one you like best in the comments. If you'd like to check out more about the trash fashion wedding dress, you can click the playlist below. And also be sure to check all of the extra resources linked in the description box. If you enjoyed today's content, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, I'd love to have you join my YouTube family by clicking that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you back here soon in the lab for my next experiment.